You're listening to episode 112, Sehreen's Story. A daughter requires neurosurgery. Okay, guys, so March is Child Life Month, and I wanted to take some time to feature some amazing organizations that are doing so much in the field of child life and so much to support children and families in crisis. Disasters can be devastating to children and teenagers. 1 out of every 7 children impacted by disaster is diagnosed with mental or developmental disorders. Child Life Disaster Relief aims to empower and support children and families in crises by integrating child life professional services into impacted communities. Be part of the solution. Donate to help fund these necessary coping services for children and teens, or sign up for training to respond with us. For more information, check out our website at www.cldisasterrelief.org. That's cldisasterrelief.org. Hello, my friends. I'm so happy that you're here today to get to know Sehreen. She has so much wisdom, and what a life experience she had even before she became a mom. And now she is doing big things for the world of children's health. But she's also a mom whose daughter has had some medical challenges. So I'm so excited to introduce you to her. Let's get started with her story. Before we jump into the episode, I wanted to let you guys know that if you are a parent, a child life specialist, or professional working with children, you're going to want the hospital or physician's office or urgent care that you take your kids to have the Child Life On-Call app. It is an evidence-based tool designed to empower children and families during medical experiences. And 100% of the child life specialists who have used this app believe that it can help with expanding child life's reach beyond the bedside. And 100% of child life specialists believe it helps parents feel more empowered in their child's care. Learn how to get the Child Life On-Call app for your facility or doctor's office by going to childlifeoncall.com/partners.
So I'm Sehreen. I live in New York City. I have 2 little girls, and I started on a completely different journey of my life when my younger daughter started missing her milestones. But before that, I worked in education and education technology for a couple of different companies here in New York. And before that, I lived a completely different life, which was that I was a diplomat and a civil servant for the State Department. So it's been a lot of changes.
Oh my gosh, Sehreen, I did not know that. So for those of you who are listening, Sehreen and I got to meet through a wonderful kind of female founders networking opportunity. And so I knew a little bit about your background, but I did not know you were a diplomat.
Yeah, I kind of look at my life and I was like, wow, who am I? Like, I don't even recognize like the first half of my life sometimes, because you know how you just get immersed in your family and your family life. You're like, oh yeah, I did that. And my absolute favorite thing to do in the world is travel.
Yeah.
So it's very funny that I don't have that component to my life anymore. In part because of COVID, but just in part because of like my work, you know?
Right. Well, I think like for me, birth was also a very like transformative experience in becoming a mother. And it also changed the trajectory of my life. I was a child life specialist in the hospital, thought I wanted to stay at home, and then boom, this is totally different. So I totally resonate with you on that.
Yeah. It's amazing what motherhood does, huh?
It's crazy.
So many levels.
So why don't we talk a little bit about, is it your youngest daughter or your oldest daughter?
Yeah, my younger daughter. Yeah.
Okay. So you had mentioned that she wasn't hitting milestones. So do you kind of want to just talk a little bit about that time of your life and what you noticed and kind of what you were told by doctors?
Yeah, I think we were on the other end of wait and see, which I know a lot of parents kind of deal with. And there wasn't anything super obvious that was off. Like, she was born, and when she was 3 weeks old, my dad got diagnosed with cancer, and he passed away pretty soon after. So my life was really busy and traumatic and hectic. And she came with me everywhere I went. Like, so when I went down to where my parents lived to be with him, she was there, and she was just this like quiet, happy baby, which my older one wasn't. My older one was just a little bit more reactive to things. She wasn't at all. And then she turned 1 and she turned into this like totally different child. She was like animated and stubborn and difficult. And I always thought to myself, oh my God, how funny is it that she like kind of gave me this year to do all the chaos.
Oh,
and then when there was a little bit more space, she's like, okay, I'm here. And it was really fun. And she was such a joy. And she didn't ever, she let me sleep until she was like a certain age. And now I haven't slept for 3.5 years because of her. So, thanks for the first year.
Yeah.
We went to our family. We were visiting my husband's side of the family, and someone noticed that there was something a little bit off about her development. And I had already been worried about like this thing, like she's petite, and I'd kind of worried about her petite size for a while. And I was like, I had just decided after that family member made the comment that I was going to push my pediatrician for a referral. And I was like, I just want to make sure it's nothing. And so I called them, and they're like, sure, it's totally fine. Just go see the specialist. And when I saw the specialist didn't dismiss it like I thought. So I was totally in shock. I just thought, okay, she's a little bit behind on like walking and talking, but it's not major. And it ended up being that started the first half of our diagnostic journey, which went on for years. And we never actually got a diagnosis, but at least we got information to work with. And then we got diagnosis this summer, which is like a whole other topic of conversation.
Yes. I'm curious about the interaction when your family member, pointed something out. Like, was that hard to receive, or were you like, was it validating? What was that like?
It was fine, actually. I think that I'm fairly open to people's opinions and feedback. And so it was presented to me in a kind of like, oh, that's interesting. That didn't happen with the other kids in our family. And I needed it because I couldn't see it myself. Yeah. And I realized that sometimes when you're so close to a person in proximity and just frequency, you don't see what other people can see, which is why so many children end up getting information about the first signs and symptoms from the daycare centers.
Yeah.
Right. Because like we're so close. It's like this interesting, like third perspective that some of us need sometimes.
Sure. And that's such a good point when you think about like daycare centers and teachers. They're just really in tune to how typical development may look like. And so, I can totally feel you on that. So my son was born it's a really simple thing called torticollis, where your head is, over to the side. And here I am, like literally a child development expert. And I had no idea until I took a picture when he was like 4 months old, and I sent it to my friend who's a speech pathologist. And she's like, is his head always that way? And I was like, what are you talking about? And I look back at all the pictures and I'm like, oh my God, he's been like this since birth. But it's so true.
You
so
don't
like
see
that,
it, right?
You don't see it. It's that trusting relationship with other people like teachers and doctors that are so important for the community
and I think
part.
It's the trust. I think that's totally what it is. It's the trust. I mean, I think we can kind of feel out who's making the comments and decide if they're worth listening to.
Exactly. Oh, we should think about that in all aspects.
Totally.
So when your doctor was like, okay, I hear what you're saying, like, let's look at this. What kinds of things did they prescribe to help get you some answers or help her meet milestones?
Well, one of the things was an MRI, and that was the big debate that we had, which is, was an MRI necessary or not? And we had a very frustrating situation. So we got a second opinion from the head of pediatric neurology at another hospital. We're in New York City, so we have access to, kind of different hospitals. And so we got a second opinion, and the second opinion was like, she looks totally fine. Like, you don't need to go ahead and get this MRI. And then we're like, I literally remember celebrating on the streets with my husband. We were so relieved, so happy that it wasn't considered something major. And then I had convinced myself that her tongue deviation was a tongue tie, like as if I knew anything, as if I was a doctor. It's just a story that I made up, right, in my head. So we went to the ENT because I just wanted to see what they thought about her deviated tongue. The ENT looked at her deviated tongue and was like, you need to get an MRI. She was like, this could have been a sign of a stroke. And it totally kind of, you freak out. It was just, it's funny because I think about how many times I've freaked out since then. And that seems actually very, very minor in comparison to everything else we've been through. But that was the trigger point to then get the MRI. I think at the same time, I had already self-referred to early intervention. And that process had been started and I was used to it. I had used early intervention for my older daughter. And so luckily we already had therapists coming at home.
Okay. So when you finally got the MRI, I guess, was that ENT the decision to move forward with that?
Yeah. We decided to just get it done. And that did give us some answers. So it did end up being helpful, which was interesting because, we've been on this journey for so long that the second opinion that we got is actually now our primary neurologist, even though he was wrong the first time.
Wow.
And what I've learned is how much of medical practice is kind of art and science combined, and the role of it feels like a bunch of different decision trees that we have to make as stakeholders, right? And like as the parent stakeholder, sometimes you're presented with decisions that you think someone else is going to make for you, and you just kind of have to be the one that makes the decisions out of a range of choices. And so like I at first, our first brush after that specialist was wrong, we were like, oh, we don't know if we should go back. And now he's made a lot of really good decisions since then. It's just not precise the way that we all think it will be.
Okay. Wow. That's such a good point, and just shows how open you are to revisiting, and keeping conversations open, not being closed off,
right.
and knowing that there are the decisions to be made. It's not black and white. And I think that's what's so hard is, I don't know about you, but like growing up, it's like, oh, you're sick. Here's the treatment, right? Oh, this is wrong. We fix it this way. And it just could not be further from the truth. And that's why like the parent voice is so incredibly vital, because you can say it A, B, and C always works. Well, it may not always work for your child. So just being willing to be an advocate and ask those questions is so important.
Yeah.
How do you think you got there? Like getting to the point of being comfortable advocating and seeking questions. Has that always been your personality?
Yeah. I've always been very open. But I think what I've honed in the process of my daughter going through this and then getting, being, sick this summer is confidence in my own voice. Right. So my husband laughs at me because we were at a very prestigious medical institution in New York City, and I basically took the neurologist to task for something he said. And he's like, you probably argued with one of like the top, specialists in the world. And I was like, as I should, right? Like, I'm the mother. This is my child. If anyone tells me not to worry, I have every right to be like, are you out of your freaking mind?
Yeah.
Right. And, I've been told and asked many times if I'm a physician or if I'm in the medical field. And I take that both as a compliment and both as a sign of worry, which is like, okay, so you obviously think I'm articulate enough in this content to think, oh, wow, this mom knows what she's doing. But on the other hand, if I weren't, then how would you treat me?
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
And I think navigating so many systems and living through this past summer where I had to beg for medical attention for something that was considered minor while she was hospitalized. She had a sinus infection that didn't go away, and nobody took me seriously. While she had a G tube up her nose, or like a feeding tube up her nose, that you just kind of like, if I don't advocate, the other side of this means that my child might be, uncomfortable at best and suffering at worst.
Yeah. Oh, so true. So you mentioned that there was a good amount of time where you didn't have a diagnosis, and it was kind of like the wait
Yeah.
and see, and it's the days can go by so slowly when you're waiting on answers. What did you do to cope
Yeah.
with that and still manage to move forward?
I created a story for myself that I didn't realize I created. And so I was relatively okay not getting a diagnosis because she was doing so well clinically. She was at school full time, like really high social emotional skills, intellectually engaged. There's nothing to worry about in some domains. The only thing I kind of worried about were things like her balance and her strength. And she was improving in those areas with a lot of therapy, but she was improving. And so I was on top of all of our doctor's appointments. We went frequently enough. And I remember our geneticist kind of made her own conclusion right before we got a surprise diagnosis from another MRI. But before that, she was like, listen, I think I feel fairly confident that this is just something that happened in utero. And I asked her, I said, do you have a lot of children who are just not diagnosed? And she's like, yes, it happens very frequently. And so for me, that was kind of, okay, fine.
Yeah.
Like, things happen to human bodies.
Sure.
And this happened. And then, 3 weeks later, we get an MRI that did give us a diagnosis. And I was like, okay.
We'll be right back. In the past, I've been really reliant on coffee and energy drinks to help me focus, but I've been drinking Magic Mind. Y'all have heard me talk about it before, and it's made a huge difference in my energy level and ability to focus. The matcha, adaptogens, and nootropics help fight procrastination, brain fog, and fatigue. And I don't know any healthcare workers or parents that don't have that in their life right now. After just a few days of adding Magic Mind to my morning routine, I noticed I needed much less caffeine. Magic Mind truly values the well-being of healthcare workers and parents, and that is why they are giving us 20% off to all of our Child Life On-Call listeners. So go to magicmind.co/childlife and use code CHILDLIFE for 20% off. If you are looking for a way to make a child in your life smile, then you have to go to smilemakers.com and go through all of the must-have toys, stickers, and prizes for kids. You'll find everything you need to make the hospital, waiting room, or even your own living room more fun with games, crafts, and prizes for every occasion. I also have very good news for you because when you go to smilemakers.com and type in OnCall20, you will get 20% off with no minimum order required. So stock up on bundles made specifically for hospital procedures and therapeutic play, and make these already very affordable items more affordable with OnCall20. That's smilemakers.com and OnCall20 for 20% off your entire order. Well, when you guys are spending time in the hospital, what helps your daughter cope the most? Like, what do you notice she struggles with, or what do you know that works really well for her?
This is going to sound like Captain Obvious, but the thing that helps her cope the most is me. Like, the proximity to me, I think, buffered the extreme versions of mental health breakdowns for her. So we were in the hospital for 2.5 months, and she definitely came out with trauma, and it was really hard. But I spent every single night in the hospital with her for 2.5 months. I didn't go home. Like, I might have spent a total of 20 hours in my apartment across 2.5 months just to like pick up stuff and spend time with my older daughter. But it was me that she needed.
What does that feel like to be the person or the thing that she needs the most?
I think I mostly feel fortunate, and that it was kind of an easy thing to give her, in the sense that as long as she had me, she could cope, right?
Yeah.
I feel really privileged that we could do that as a family, and we had the resources to make that happen, whether those resources were that I could like not work on my startup for a little while, or that my husband could take care of everything else, or that we could split up, because that I can't take for granted.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
I think the other side of it that makes me sad is how it affected my older daughter. I think that's where I start feeling like, oh man, poor baby.
Yeah, I think it's like when you're in with your child who is sick, you're in fight or flight mode, right? And it's like you really don't feel you're not even able to make a choice. You just have to be there, right? There's this part that's like I absolutely have to be here, and that is the truth, and that's the reality of the moment that you're in. And I think a lot of families, it's just not fair. Like it's just not fair. You can't be in two places at once, and you absolutely have to be at one place at that time. And it's horrible. It sucks.
It's a lot. I mean, I relied on our child life specialist a lot to help me. Like, I leaned on them to help me make it work. Because they were so helpful in terms of advocacy. I remember her name was Christy, and we were at rehab. We were inpatient rehab. And some days she would just look at me and she would be like, go outside, take a break. Like, we got her. When she comes back from therapy, she'll sit at the nurse's station, but please go. And I was very vocal about the fact that I needed a break. And so we worked together to make that happen, because it was hard. Like, I work on a children's health startup. So my entire day career is children's health. My entire personal life is children's health. And then when I was in inpatient rehab, I saw other children that were struggling, like my daughter. And that broke me. It still does. Like, I realize that I block out a lot of stuff, but to see children struggle, it's kind of your worst nightmare.
It is. I had a nurse tell me, and her experience was the NICU, but it works in every aspect of children's healthcare, is that when families are walking through a unit in a hospital, like they're walking through a war zone, right? They're seeing things that are traumatic, that they don't understand, that they can't comprehend. They're seeing pain and suffering. And that is a whole part of the experience. And I can tell you a little insight that when we have children come visit the ICU, siblings especially, child life specialists are looking at these things like, are all of the curtains closed to all of the rooms on the walkway to the room that they're going to, right? Because we want to minimize the amount of trauma that they have to see. It's a very real thing to feel like, you've seen trauma in your child, and then seeing it in others is a whole other level. But
that's so interesting, because my daughters were not allowed to see each other because of COVID. Yeah. And so that was always it was always heartbreaking for me. The child life specialist, when we were in the PICU, facilitated a family meetup in the garden. And that was the first time they saw each other post-surgery. And, there's just some memories in your life that are both like sweet and really sad. I think the first time they saw each other like that will be in our memories as something that's really hard. But at least they got to see each other. And, when we moved into the general ward of the hospital, they didn't have enough staff for the kids to be able to see each other in a meeting like that. Yeah. But what you said is interesting. I've always kind of lamented the fact that they couldn't see each other, but I never thought about the fact that perhaps my older daughter not going to the hospital setting might have also spared her some trauma.
Yeah. I think that's where like the role of child life in the hospital is so important, because they can help you get to those decisions, and there are ways to make it less traumatic if it is going to happen. And it's just things that the medical team, it's not that they don't care about, it's just that they don't have the capacity to think about. So that's why it's like having a child life specialist think like, I'm going to just walk through here real quick, make sure this door's closed, that door's closed. It could be
such a huge thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And feel included. Like our child life specialist at Cornell, like sent Halloween stuff back for my older daughter.
For sure.
And so she felt part of like my younger daughter's world, and my younger daughter felt like she impacted her older daughter's world. And you're right. It was so thoughtful because like I didn't have the capacity to be thoughtful.
Absolutely.
At all. I was just surviving.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I think that's where, as child life specialists, we kind of can have this ego, like we're experts at this and that. And sometimes it's the smallest things, like sending home a birthday gift for the sibling whose birthday it is. You know, that is the stuff that families remember and makes a difference, because then the parent doesn't have to, you know, go shopping to Target real quick. Like we could just help you by giving you this thing, and it feels small, but it's huge.
It's huge. It's huge. And then it becomes a symbol for later, right? Because they're like those tangible things sit at home. And there's a common reference point for the kids.
Yeah.
So it's been really helpful.
What helped you the most? Are you a spiritual person? You know, pouring into your own cup? Like how do you do that?
I am. I think I need a certain amount of alone time every day to recharge. And when my daughter was going into surgery, which is, you know, one of the biggest surgeries anyone can have, child or not, I worked with two close friends on kind of like my mental and spiritual game. And that helped a lot, because like when I think about sitting in the waiting room while she was in surgery, when I think about it now, I genuinely don't know how I survived without losing my mind. But after she rolled out of surgery, I think I kind of was so shocked. I left everything. And so I had to go back to the podcast I listened to the friends who were kind of like-minded and had the confidence to help me be optimistic and fill my own cup. And so I think those two things, like finding the content that I really resonated with online and the people that could lift me up, were the two things that got me through the hardest days.
Did you have to be by yourself in that waiting room because of COVID, or was your husband there with you?
My husband was there, thank God.
Okay.
Yeah, they let the parents come.
Yeah.
Both parents, yeah.
What do you think are some of the hard parts about having a child with special needs and high medical needs? What for you is like the annoying, really difficult, like parts of it?
I think now that we're home, the hardest part is, you know, aside from like the everyday finding a schedule, that was the hardest part when we got home. Like, how do we keep her on a feeding tube schedule? She had not been on a feeding tube before, so it was new to us. How do you order supplies, and how do you split the work? But once we got into that pattern, you know, now we're pretty good. I think the other pattern is knowing how to make yourself visible to the people in your life that are your friends and your family. You know, it's so different, I think, being in the position that we're in. And I think there are some assumptions that now that we're back from the hospital, it's over.
Yeah.
But nothing could be further from the truth.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
Like, you know, like we live it every day. And sometimes I feel like, oh yeah, as people, do we really understand each other? And some days I feel like yes, and some days I feel like no.
Yeah. It's like two really different hards. Like being in the hospital is really hard. Being at home is really hard. They're all different reasons.
Yeah.
And then I want to hear about your business and what you're creating, because it's so impressive. But one of my last questions I want to ask about your story is just if you could tell us one of the things that your daughters, and I'll say both, you know, have taught you through this experience. What would you say you've learned from them?
I think how to be happy. I think we are a happy family. And I'm really proud of that. Like really proud of it, that all four of us could go through something so hard and just find joy in doing nothing or being with each other or being silly. And so, you know, it sounds nice and kind of like, oh, that's so nice that you get there, but it actually has really big ripple effects on the way I think about how I want to live my life. And it is like having like like not taking things too seriously that don't need to be taken seriously, and having joy in the moment and letting go of the formalities to, one day, hopefully after our business is successful and I move on to other things, what does that look like? I think about that all the time. And my husband and I had like a very deep conversation about this, about like, what does a more liberated life look like? Because there was a part of me before that had this idea of like, the kids will grow up and they'll do what they do and go to college and do all these things. And then we'll have time to do the things that we love. And now, whether it's because of what we've been through with my daughter or COVID or seeing other people's lives be unpredictable, you can't really wait to do what you want in life. And I believe that more and more every day. And it's really transformed how I think. And sometimes in a nice way, but sometimes in a very confusing way.
For sure. Yeah. Oh, that's so beautiful. So when I'm working in a hospital, I really check my emotions as I should, right? Like I'm not the family member going through this, but to be honest with you, like sitting here talking with you in my home and like hearing the amount of joy that comes through you, it brings tears to my eyes because it wasn't an easy path that you had, that you're going through. So I think it's just incredible that what you've chosen to see. And I have a good friend, Katya, and she says, when you wake up in the morning, don't ask like, what do I want to accomplish this day? Like, what are my to-do lists? And of course we may have to do those things, but the other question you ask is like, what do I want to enjoy today? And then like those become the priority. And can you work around the things you have to do with the things you want to enjoy? And I love that. I think that's so cool.
So nice.
So talk to us a little bit about your children's health startup and what you want us to know and how other families can listen and get involved.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So it's called Sleuth, and the website is hellosleuth.com. And what we do is we collect caregiver expertise on their child's health, and we share back insights and data for parents of similar children. So in the way that parents are always looking for information on specialists, on treatments that have worked, on resources or therapies that might have worked from each other, we actually use technology to make that exchange faster, easier, and more accurate. And it's important to me, and I think your audience understands this more than any other, but basically caregiver expertise is really valuable, and it's really accurate at scale. And we think and believe that should be elevated and is a source of information that goes beyond, let's say, what people can just get from their doctor, who knows, for example, that the therapeutic system doesn't have as much connections to the medical system, and that the education system isn't connected either. And so all of those systems come together in the parent. And we would love for people to come onto our platform and share their stories. It's anonymous. You always have control over what you share. Those are really important features for us, in part from my own experience. Like, I do not share my daughter's diagnosis publicly. And even though I'm engaged on several Facebook groups, I always feel like someone somewhere like knows more information about her than I want them to. And so we've designed this really to be caregiver centric.
Oh, that's so amazing. So how does it work? So they would just go on and kind of just start sharing. Is it audio? Is it text? How do parents start sharing?
It's like a survey. Okay. It's like a survey. Okay. So you can go to join now, and then we ask you these questions about your child's symptoms, when you saw it, who you saw to get help, how you would rate that specialist, and other information you want to share with parents of similar children. And so we use data science as a main methodology for Sleuth, because we know the application of that technology and methodology just makes information easier to read and more accurate. And so you'll see, for example, that we've created a timeline out of those symptoms for each parent. There's a way to look at insights, like how many people rated a certain therapy as effective for their child's condition or not. And then we actually have assessments that you can usually get from your pediatrician if you know to ask, but we've actually converted them for digital use, and you can take them on our website too. But we are in the process of growing. So please just reach out to me. I'm happy to tell you more about where we're going with it, but we're going to expand into a lot of areas that impact parents today. And we'll have some more surveys for people to take.
That's so exciting and so needed. And it's just what you said about the Facebook group. Those are so wonderful, but there isn't, somebody looking through what everybody's saying and fact checking and making sure it's true and not just a misconception or, it's
Totally.
just huge what you're building, and you're going to change the world.
Thank you.
So we can't wait to watch.
So. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Please come along on our journey. I would love it. It's funny that you're talking about that with Facebook, because I used to joke with people that from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. was my Facebook searching time.
Yes, so. For sure. I've had a mom tell me before, she's like, well, I did it. I found the end of the internet. I've just done it. I found everything. So
exactly.
If we want to follow along with you on social media, and you mentioned the website, how can we follow along with you, Sehreen?
Yes. The best way to follow along is on Instagram. And it's just my full name at Sehreen Neurally. So I post some of my personal journey there and give updates on Sleuth, which I will also be growing on the social side too. But right now I post mostly from my personal account.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And I love talking with you and love to have you back once you figured out how to save the world. That would be great.
All of us are saving the world. Yeah, exactly. Thank you for having me.
Yes. Thank you for listening to the Child Life On Call podcast. I'm your host, Katie Taylor, and you can follow us at Child Life On Call on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Please rate and review to make it easier for other families to find us. We have cute merch available at www.bonfire.com/store/Child Life On Call, and you can listen to more episodes and find resources at childlifepodcast.com.